What would you do if your neighbor called the HOA and had your truck towed, all because she said it ruined her view? Well, this man didn't fight back with words. He fought back with something that left the entire neighborhood speechless. But before I tell you what he built, let me take you to the very beginning. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, because this story will make you rethink what it really means to judge someone too soon. It was a quiet morning in Maple Ridge Estates, one of those perfectly manicured neighborhoods where every mailbox looked the same, every hedge was trimmed to perfection, and everyone knew everyone's business. Then one day, a rusty blue pickup truck rolled in. The kind of truck that looked like it had survived storms, long trips, and years of hard work. Behind the wheel was Ethan, a man in his late 30s, wearing dusty jeans and a faded shirt. He parked right in front of his new house, a small fixer-upper that looked completely out of place among the polished porches and shining SUVs. From her window across the street, Karen, the self-proclaimed president of the HOA, was already watching. Her lips pressed tightly together as she muttered, "Ugh, that truck. Not in my neighborhood." She even snapped a picture on her phone. By the end of the first week, Ethan had already received 3 warning letters from the HOA, one about his truck violating appearance standards, another about visible tools in the driveway, and a third for unapproved construction activity. Ethan didn't argue. Whenever Karen stopped by with her clipboard, he only smiled politely and said, "Hi there, Miss Karen. I'm just fixing up the place. You'll hardly notice me soon." But Karen noticed everything. Every morning, she saw him outside hauling lumber, cutting boards, and mixing cement. To her, it looked like a mess. To Ethan, it was something else entirely. One evening, as Karen and her friends sipped wine on her patio, she frowned. "That truck," she hissed, "it's ruining my sunset view." Her friend Linda tried to calm her down. "Maybe he's just fixing something up, Karen. You could talk to him." Karen scoffed. "Talk? To him? He's violating HOA rules. That truck doesn't belong here." The next morning, she made the call. By 10 a.m., Ethan's truck was being towed right out of his driveway. He didn't yell. He didn't even look angry. He just stood there quietly, wiping his hands on a rag, watching the tow truck drive away. Karen smirked from across the street and called out, "You'll thank me later. Now you can focus on cleaning up that mess behind your house." Ethan simply nodded and went back to work. But that night, she heard hammering again, louder this time. Days turned into weeks, and Ethan's project grew bigger. Tall wooden frames, metal beams, constant deliveries. The sound of saws, hammers, and trucks filled the air. Neighbors began to whisper. Is he building a shed? Maybe a workshop? Could it be illegal? Karen couldn't stand it anymore. She called for an emergency HOA meeting. In front of the neighbors, she presented photos of Ethan's backyard as if she were exposing a crime. "This is not in compliance with HOA standards," she said sharply. "We have rules for a reason. This man is destroying the beauty of our neighborhood." Everyone murmured in agreement, and by the end of the meeting, they voted unanimously Ethan would be fined daily until he stopped construction. The next morning, Ethan found the notice taped to his door. He read it slowly, folded it neatly, and slipped it into his pocket. But instead of stopping, he worked even harder. He was outside before sunrise, working even when it rained. Karen, furious, stood on the sidewalk filming him. "You're violating HOA codes. You're making our neighborhood look like a dump." Ethan only smiled and said softly, "Sometimes, Karen, beauty takes time." She rolled her eyes, but for the first time, something about the calm in his voice made her uneasy. 3 months later, Karen came home and froze. The tall wooden wall behind Ethan's house was gone, replaced by something breathtaking. The entire backyard had been transformed into a beautiful white pavilion with solar panels, flower beds, benches, and a sign that read, "The Maple Ridge Veterans Memorial Garden." Neighbors gathered around, staring in awe. Ethan stepped out, wearing a clean suit, his expression calm but emotional. "My father was a veteran," he said quietly. He passed away last year. This was his dream, to build a place where people could sit, reflect, and heal. Karen's face went pale. Wait, your father was, she stammered. Yes, Ethan nodded. And the truck you had towed, it was his. I was restoring it to place right here, in his memory. Karen's eyes filled with guilt. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. What do you think Karen should do next? Should she apologize, or is it too late? Comment your thoughts below, and make sure you subscribe, because in part 2, something happens that turns this neighborhood upside down. Karen couldn't sleep that night. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Ethan standing in his backyard surrounded by neighbors, all smiling and clapping for him. They were taking pictures with him, shaking his hand, thanking him. Her own words echoed in her head, "You're making our neighborhood look like a dump." But instead of apologizing, something colder crept into her heart. Embarrassment turned into bitterness. He made me look like a fool, she muttered under her breath. In front of everyone. She stayed up late scrolling through neighborhood group chats, reading all the praise Ethan was getting. Every message felt like a jab to her pride. By morning, she had convinced herself that Ethan's little memorial garden was just a stunt, a way to make her look bad. She told herself he probably didn't even get a permit. And that's when she decided to fight back, one more time. The next day, while Ethan was at work, Karen marched straight to City Hall. She spoke to the zoning officer, filed a complaint about unpermitted construction, and even handed over photos of his backyard. She left with a smirk. Let's see how long that memorial stays standing, she whispered as she walked out. 3 days later, a city inspector showed up at Ethan's door. Neighbors watched as the man in the yellow vest walked around the property with a clipboard. Ethan stayed polite, calm, cooperative as always. But when the inspector left, his face looked troubled. That night, Karen saw him sitting on his porch, staring at the memorial in silence. The next morning, Karen got her wish. A bright orange notice appeared on Ethan's gate. Temporary cease order, pending zoning review. She almost laughed out loud. Finally, she said. Finally, some order around here. But her laughter didn't last long. Later that evening, she overheard 2 neighbors talking near her driveway. Did you hear what Ethan said? One whispered. Apparently, the city never processed his original permit because of a clerical error. He had approval all along. Karen's stomach twisted. She tried to brush it off, but for the first time, she felt something new, not anger, not pride, fear. Days passed. The cease order was lifted, and the memorial garden officially opened. People from outside the neighborhood came to visit. Veterans, families, even local reporters. There was laughter, tears, and gratitude. Ethan never mentioned the trouble Karen had caused. He simply stood by, helping elderly visitors to their seats, serving coffee, handing out flowers. Karen couldn't avoid it anymore. Every time she drove by, she saw people smiling, taking pictures by the restored blue truck now parked beside a marble plaque that read, "In memory of Sergeant Thomas Walker, a man who believed in peace." Ethan's father. That night, Karen's husband, George, looked up from his newspaper and said, "You should go talk to him, you know. Say sorry." Karen's eyes snapped up. "Excuse me?" "You heard me," George said calmly. "You went too far this time. Everyone knows it. You can't lead a community if you can't own up to a mistake." She slammed her hand on the table. "I didn't do anything wrong. I was following the rules." George sighed. "Maybe the rules aren't always the problem." She glared at him but didn't respond. That night, she stared out the window again. Ethan's backyard lights were glowing softly, illuminating the memorial. A few neighbors were gathered there, laughing gently, telling stories. And then she saw something that made her chest tighten, Ethan helping a little boy place a flower by the plaque. The boy hugged Ethan before running off. Karen turned away. "He's just pretending to be nice," she muttered. "That's all for attention." But the more she said it, the less she believed it. Weeks passed, and the HOA elections came up. For years, Karen had run unopposed. But this time, a new name appeared on the ballot: Ethan Walker. The announcement spread like wildfire. The neighborhood buzzed with gossip. Some said Ethan didn't stand a chance because Karen had history and control. Others whispered that they were tired of her rules and fear tactics. At first, Karen laughed it off. "Let him run," she said to Linda. "He'll embarrass himself." But as the election day drew closer, she started seeing signs, actual signs, on lawns that used to support her. Vote for change. Vote Ethan. Her heart raced every time she drove past them. When she confronted one of her closest friends, Brenda, about it, Brenda just looked sad. "Karen, we all appreciate what you've done, but things have changed. Ethan's shown us what community really means." Karen's face turned red. "So you're turning your back on me because of him? Because of some memorial garden?" Brenda shook her head. "No, Karen. Because of your pride." The night before the election, Karen couldn't sleep again. She walked outside, the air cool and still. Across the street, Ethan was still awake, sitting by the memorial alone. The light from the pavilion flickered softly against his face. For a brief moment, Karen considered crossing the street, maybe saying something. But she stopped halfway down her driveway. Her pride wouldn't let her. She turned around and went back inside. The next morning, the votes were counted. Ethan won. By a landslide. Karen didn't even show up to the meeting where they announced it. For the first time in years, she stayed home, blinds drawn, curtains closed. The neighborhood outside was alive with laughter and cheers. Later that evening, Ethan knocked on her door. She didn't answer. He knocked again, then said quietly, "Karen, I'm not here to fight. I'm just here to say thank you." She froze behind the door, not sure if she heard right. Ethan continued, his voice calm. "You might not realize it, but if you hadn't pushed me the way you did, this place wouldn't exist. My dad always said challenges reveal who we are, and you made me stronger." Then she heard him walk away. She peeked through the window just in time to see him wave at her door before crossing the street. Karen closed her eyes and whispered, "Why does that make me feel worse?" Over the next few weeks, Karen's presence around the neighborhood faded. She stopped attending events, stopped sending notices, stopped her morning patrols. But inside, something was shifting. Every day, she looked at the memorial from her window. Sometimes she saw Ethan reading to kids, sometimes elderly veterans sitting in silence, sometimes people crying and smiling at the same time. One day, a letter arrived in her mailbox. It was from Ethan. She hesitated before opening it, but curiosity got the better of her. It read, "Karen, I wanted to thank you again for everything, even the hard parts. You were right to care about our neighborhood. You just forgot what it was supposed to stand for. The memorial isn't just for my dad. It's for anyone who's ever felt unseen. I know you meant well, even when it didn't seem that way. If you ever want to visit, the gate's always open." Karen read the letter 3 times. She sat down, staring at it in silence. For a moment, her eyes glistened, but she quickly wiped them. Still, she didn't go. Months passed, and autumn rolled in. Leaves turned gold, the air crisp. One morning, Karen heard laughter and music coming from across the street. Ethan was hosting a small ceremony, a day of honor, according to the flyers. People from the city came. News cameras. Families. Karen stood behind her curtain, watching the crowd gather. Then something unexpected happened. Ethan walked up to the microphone and said, "Before we begin, I want to dedicate this year's ceremony to someone special, a person who taught me how to stand my ground and never give up, even when misunderstood. Someone who challenged me, even when it wasn't easy." Karen's breath caught. He smiled and looked toward her house. "This one's for you, Karen." The crowd turned to look at her window. She froze, unable to move, tears filling her eyes. She stepped back, heart pounding. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. That night, she sat on her porch for the first time in months. The street was quiet again. She looked at the glowing memorial lights and whispered, "Why did he forgive me when I don't deserve it?" She never apologized, not out loud. But every evening after that, she left a single flower by her mailbox, and every morning, when she woke up, she found it gone. Someone had taken it and placed it by the memorial plaque. What do you think? The storyteller's voice fades in. Was Ethan right to forgive her? Or should he have let her learn the hard way? Tell me in the comments, and make sure you subscribe, because part 3 will reveal something about Karen that no one ever expected. It was early winter now. Frost glistened on the rooftops, and Maple Ridge Estates had never looked so peaceful. The Veterans Memorial Garden stood quietly across from Karen's house, its lights glowing softly under the cold morning sky. Every evening, someone new came to visit. Some brought flowers, others photos of loved ones. It had become more than a neighborhood project, it was now a place of healing. And yet, inside her warm, quiet house, Karen still hadn't set foot across the street. Every day, she told herself she would. And every day, she found a reason not to. Pride, shame, fear, they tangled inside her like vines she couldn't pull free from. One day, she saw a car she didn't recognize parked near Ethan's house. A woman stepped out, holding a small box. Karen watched from her window as Ethan greeted her with a hug. They spoke softly, and Karen noticed tears in the woman's eyes as she handed him the box. Later that evening, curiosity won. She walked outside under the pretense of checking her mail but stopped when she heard voices. Ethan was sitting on his porch, holding the box. The woman, maybe in her late 50s, was beside him. "He talked about you a lot," she said. "You were his closest friend." Ethan smiled sadly. "Yeah. He was more than that. He was like a father to me. Even before I knew he was." Karen froze. Her breath caught. Before he knew he was? What did that mean? The woman continued softly, "You deserve to know the full story, Ethan. Your father didn't just serve his country, he saved people, too. And one of them lived right here in this neighborhood. Her name was..." Karen's heart dropped. She didn't need to hear the rest. She stumbled back into her house, slamming the door behind her, her hands trembling. She leaned against the wall, breathing heavily, her mind racing with old memories she thought she'd buried for good. Decades ago, before Maple Ridge Estates, before the perfect lawns and the clipboards, there had been another life. She had been young, reckless, hopeful. Her brother had joined the army. She remembered the day the letter came, "We regret to inform you." She had spent years angry at the world. Angry at the military. Angry at anyone who wore a uniform. But there had been one man who had reached out to her, a soldier who tried to comfort her during the loss. His name was Thomas Walker. Ethan's father. Tears filled her eyes as memories she'd locked away came flooding back. She remembered how Thomas had written her letters even after her brother's death, trying to help her forgive, to move forward. But she never responded. She had thrown every letter away, blaming him for what happened. And now, years later, she had taken her anger out on his son, the man who had done nothing but build something beautiful in his father's name. That night, Karen didn't sleep. She sat in her chair, staring at the memorial lights outside her window. Every flicker felt like a heartbeat, a reminder of the man she wronged without even realizing it. The next morning, she finally gathered the courage to walk across the street. For the first time in months, she stood at the entrance of the memorial garden. The air was crisp, and her breath formed small clouds as she exhaled. The blue truck gleamed in the sunlight, freshly polished. The marble plaque shone with the engraved words, "He believed in forgiveness, even when it wasn't deserved." Her knees felt weak. She knelt beside the plaque, trembling, and whispered, "Thomas. I'm sorry." Her voice cracked. "I never meant to hurt your boy. I just didn't know." Behind her, a quiet voice said, "I figured you might come one day." Karen turned around. Ethan stood there, his hands in his pockets, a soft, knowing look on his face. She quickly wiped her eyes. I shouldn't be here. Yes, you should, Ethan said gently. This place was built for people like you. Karen swallowed hard. You don't understand. I knew your father. Ethan's eyes softened even more. I know. She froze. You know? He nodded slowly. The woman who came by yesterday, she was my aunt. She told me about you. My dad wrote about you in his letters. Karen's knees nearly gave out. He wrote about me? Ethan nodded. He said you lost your brother. He said you were one of the kindest people he ever met, just angry at the world. He said he hoped one day you'd forgive yourself. Tears streamed down her face. He wrote that? After I ignored him? After everything? Ethan stepped closer. He never held it against you. That's who he was. And that's why I built this, not just for him, but for everyone who's ever carried pain they didn't know how to let go of. For the first time in years, Karen broke down completely. The weight of all her anger, guilt, and pride came crashing down. She covered her face, sobbing. Ethan didn't say anything, he just sat beside her quietly, letting her cry. When she finally found her voice, it came out small and broken. I spent my whole life trying to control everything around me because I couldn't control what happened to him. I thought being strict, keeping order, would stop bad things from happening again. Ethan looked at her, his eyes kind. You don't have to carry that anymore. She nodded slowly, her hands shaking. I don't deserve forgiveness. He smiled faintly. Neither did I, at one point. But my dad used to say, forgiveness isn't about who deserves it. It's about who needs it. She let out a long, shaky breath. For the first time, she felt the icy walls around her heart melt away. From that day on, things changed in Maple Ridge Estates. Karen didn't vanish anymore, she reappeared, but softer, quieter. She still cared about the neighborhood, but not in the same way. She started volunteering at the memorial, helping with events, planting flowers. She never announced it or tried to take credit, she just did it. And every morning, without fail, she placed a single white rose by the blue truck. Months later, Ethan organized another event, a tribute to his father's life. The crowd gathered again, laughter and tears filling the air. Karen stood near the back, smiling quietly. When Ethan took the microphone, he said something that made her heart swell. I used to think people like Karen were my enemies, he said. But the truth is, she reminded me what it means to fight for something you believe in. Sometimes we get lost in our pain, but people like her show us how to find our way back. The crowd turned and clapped for her. Karen wiped her tears and smiled, but this time, it wasn't pride, it was peace. Later that night, as she stood alone by the memorial, she whispered, "Thank you, Thomas, for sending your son to finish what you started." The camera zooms in on the plaque glowing softly in the moonlight. The wind rustles the leaves, and Ethan's father's name glimmers. The voiceover closes. Sometimes, the people who seem the hardest to love are the ones who need it the most. And sometimes, forgiveness doesn't come with words, it comes with change. What do you think, viewers? Was Karen finally redeemed? Or did Ethan's kindness teach us something deeper about second chances? Tell me what you think in the comments below. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, because stories like this remind us that even the coldest hearts can find their way home.